Good morning, and I know what date it is today. It's the 1st of January 2021.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year, everybody. I hope it all went well and that you've started it on a good footing, as they say. Not that any of us will be first footing. We got first foot in the Clyde this morning, and that's about as far as it's gone. So, yeah, I hope everybody's well. It was a very different New Year for a lot of us. Mind you, on Facebook this morning, there seemed to be a number of people that managed to still get themselves involved in some looked like fun activities. I saw that a girl that I know, Lorna, had climbed up Tinto with a group of girls. That looked fantastic. That they spent the bells up there, so that's awesome. I'm just floating about here trying to find my feet. So, what have we been talking about? The last few vlogs that I've been doing these vlogs since March, not daily, but as often as I can find the motivation to do them. So the last few vlogs that we were doing was I've been contemplating the thoughts of depression being a protection mechanism as opposed to a mental illness, and starting to look and think about depression differently. But one of the things that I had noticed through the vlogs that I've been doing on depression is that mental health has become so stigmatised that there's so much shame around it. There's a massive amount of shame around about mental health, which is really unfortunate because, good morning Lindsay, Happy New Year. It was a quiet one for our street, wasn't it? I heard a few fireworks going off. I don't know if they were coming for your house at midnight, but hope you're well. So yeah, shame. So when I talk about shame with regards to depression, we've got shame that's associated with addiction, with alcoholism, with addictive drives and behaviours, and that does question that how addictive is shame itself. So there's not going to be a church service on the 1st of January, but speaking biblically around about shame, which has been something which has always interested me, around about the good morning Sally. Right, so when we look at the book of Genesis and we look at the creation story and we look at how the Garden of Eden was presented to us as this mythical, magical place of oneness, and a place where there was no fear and where living was easy. It was explained to us in the Bible that the Garden of Eden was such a fantastic, joyful place to hang out. And then we disobeyed and we ate the fruit from the forbidden tree, if you remember. So that's a nice passage to go and remind yourself of, on how we lived in one regard in this mythical, beautiful place, free of all fear, free of all illness, where there wasn't any COVID, where there wasn't any animosity, where there wasn't anybody any better or any worse than anybody else. The animals all lived in unity, and the lamb laid with the lion, etc., etc., right? So I'm babbling on now, but the snake tempted Eve to eat the fruit from the forbidden tree, of which she did. And the very first thing, if you remember in the Bible, what she did was she covered up her nakedness. So if we work backwards, psychology, thoughts, feelings, action, right? The action was covering up the nakedness. The feeling was shame, right? And it doesn't actually say in the Bible what the thought was, but I would imagine that was something linked into judgment. So basically shame, right, was one of the first emotions that's documented that took us into the fall, if you like, that took us away from oneness and away from unity, right? So then, as we've said before, we've spoke about these kind of things, that shame is as addictive as heroin. Shame works on the nucleus accumbens in the brain, and it works on the reward pathways of the brain in the same way that cocaine or heroin does. Now, interestingly enough, the most addictive of all of those emotions is pride. And pride can be an emotion that is used to cover up shame, right? So a lot of people that are very proud, if you like, it's because they've got an underlying feeling of shame, right? So It is actually called this morning, Mr. Finlay. It's freezing, right? So, first vlog of the year. It's going to be a quick one because I'm going for a walk this morning. But if we're thinking about addiction and we're thinking about depression and we're thinking about mental health and we're thinking about all these different thoughts around about where we're stuck, okay? So wherever we're stuck, the question that I'm looking to ask now is, where you're stuck, okay, is there shame? Is there shame involved in where you find yourself being stuck? Right? So, is shame the emotion that binds us and keeps us stuck in a paradigm of not being able to move forward? Look at how closely linked shame is with addiction. And then that throws up a question. That throws up a question, right? That throws up a question which I've asked for a number of years, right? I've asked, which is, if somebody's been sober for decades, right? Well, I've been sober for 15 years, right? So let's just say that I went out right now and got completely and utterly smashed on whiskey, right? What would be the very first thing I would feel after doing that, apart from hungover and having a headache? The first thing I'm going to feel is very shamed. I'm going to be ashamed of what I did, probably of what I've said, and how I've acted, right? So, question. Morning, how are you? You well? So, the question would be, how closely linked shame,
5 minutes,
shame and addiction is. Okay, so shame and depression. So we've got a society, we've got a lot of people that have been shamed into mental health and, you know, oh, I've got something wrong with me. So how helpful is that? That's the question I guess I'm asking, is how helpful is it to think about mental health and addiction from the paradigm of which we've been thinking about it? So one of the things that I put up a couple of weeks ago was around about addiction and Portugal, and how when the stigma was lifted, they've had a 66% decrease in drug-related deaths, whereas if you look in Scotland, drug-related deaths have gone absolutely through the roof. So, how are you? You well? So, how do we start to lift the stigma around about mental health? Lots of people are struggling right now. We've got a pandemic. We're fighting this pandemic, and what we've been talking about in the last few days before New Year was around about what if we've got depression wrong? What if we've got addiction wrong? What if the model of addiction that we've been working with is completely flawed? And instead of thinking of addiction as being the problem, we started to look at addiction as the solution. Addiction is the solution to people's internal suffering that they don't feel that they've got the capacity to manage. So there was a loss, there was a bereavement, or a lot of trauma, which led to a lot of shame-based ideology, and that shame-based ideology is keeping us stuck in a paradigm of not being able to. What was I saying there? Sorry, I lost focus. I'm so cold, and I've lost a sock. I'm looking about me for my socks. So. Shame, 1st of January, and I'm standing here freezing talking about shame. But oh, I lost it there for a minute. So I'm still babbling on about shame. So when we start to look at mental health issues that we've got, people are starting to lose their sense of identity. They're losing their purpose. You know, there's so much more to work than work. It gives us meaning. It gives us a place where we get a lot more back from having a purpose and getting out. So in these times of struggle round about this pandemic and how much it's stripping away from people, How much shame is there in the family? How much shame is there around about perhaps the way that we've been? Or how much shame is there around about depression? And how about we start to at least think about shame in a different kind of way, so that we can move into 2021 from less of a shame-based model. Now, back to some of the things that we've been vlogging about last year, is if we were born with shame inside us, and there's been a shame that's been passed down intergenerationally, and that which is systemically buried in the architecture of our psyches, then we're not going to know what it's like to live completely free of shame. So it's like, for an example, if a child was born and you gave it heroin every day of its life, that's its normal. That becomes your subjective experience of reality. And the question is, I guess, what if our subjective experience of reality underneath it has a level of shame that we've never actually experienced, looking out onto a world that doesn't have shame? Shame that we might have an alcoholic parent, shame that we might have a parent that's been unemployed, shame because of poverty, shame because of wealth, shame because of, our parents, or a parent might have been, might have had an accident at work, wasn't able to work. There might have been a child, you might have a sibling that's perhaps disabled, or you might have a sibling which has got autism. And of course, we have love for the parent that's in the clutches of addiction. Of course we do. It's our parent or our sibling. But we also might feel shame around about this not perfect family that we were in. But I guess I'm babbling away here. Happy New Year. And can we at least ask the question, how helpful is shame? Do we have any shame? Are we feeling shamed? And what can we do to release the shame that's binding us into a system that's not helpful for our mental and emotional well-being? So, have a fantastic 1st of January. Have a great day. It's Friday. It's the end of the week as well. The beginning of a new year and the end of a week. Have a good one. All the best. Take care.